Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you are in. Welcome again to another live stream of our Visual Studio Code channel. So excited. We have like someone awesome that's going to be appearing today. Hello, Cyber Junkie and Wasis Hyro. Sasoka. I should just say WHS. Hello, WHS. Glad you guys are joining the early birds here. All right. So before we get started, it is Thursday. So let's go ahead and kick off our Throwback TikTok Thursday segment.
Ever get frustrated reading CSV files? Then you need this week's extension of the week. The Rainbow CSV extension highlights each column in a different color so you can easily read through the data. You can also hover to see column info, and you get a fixed header line when sticky scroll is enabled.
That was fun. All right, so without any further ado, I want to introduce our guest, which is going to be Brigit Murtaugh. And Brigit, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Ronald?
I'm doing great. By the way, did I pronounce your last name precisely, Murtaugh? I just realized I've never said, I've always just said Brigit.
You nailed it. Brigit Murtaugh. You got it.
Great. So Brigit Murtaugh, she is like our senior product manager here at Microsoft. By the way, for those that are not too familiar with that title, what exactly does a senior product manager does?
Yeah, I think that really interfacing with customers and being the voice and advocate for the customers and working with cross-discipline teams is really what PM can mean. And so doing customer interviews, talking to customers on GitHub or social media and calls and all of that, and really understanding like what folks want and need and how we can bring that to the product and then get further feedback on it to continue improving the product.
Nice. Nice. And were you an engineer before doing that, or you came on as a product manager at the very beginning?
I came on as a product manager. I did an internship with Microsoft that was PM, and then I did that full-time as well. I did study computer science in college, though, so that's where I got the technical insights and background.
Nice. All right. So what are we up to today? What are you going to be showing us?
Yeah, today, and I like to call it, we're going to use VS Code to develop anything from anywhere. Develop anywhere with VS Code. And that sounds pretty broad, but we're going to take a look today at what that really means. So I'm really excited to go through today and show folks and to hear your feedback as well and your questions and what you think you would use these for. So you could really think for like any kind of setting, whether maybe you have a super secure virtual machine that you use for work. Maybe you're traveling and you're going to have your desktop machine under your desk at home, but you'd still like to develop against it. Or maybe you're going to go on a fun trip and it's summer and you're going to go to the beach and you want to develop from a tablet. Like you're going to be able to use VS Code from all those places and you're going to be able to switch between them super seamlessly too. And in today's session as well, I'm just going to sprinkle in some different like tips and tricks and things that I find helpful and interesting in VS Code. And you might find them useful too and might want to pick them up in your editor.
Cool. Excited to check that out. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in.
All right. Sounds good. So to kick things off today, I'm going to go to one of my favorite places, and I'm probably a little bit biased being a PM on the VS Code team, but one of my favorite places is the VS Code website. So let's go ahead and hop over to the browser. And here in the browser, and let me know if you can't see, you should see code.visualstudio.com. Let me just make sure. Look good?
Yeah, you can probably bump up the resolution just a little bit.
All right, is that helpful?
Did that even bump it up?
I zoomed in. I usually I'm at 1920 by 1080, so maybe just maybe
I
I'm
think it's fine for now. So like when the code comes up, I'll ask if I need to, because this is just like the splash script page anyway. So
sweet. Sounds good. All right, yeah, so here we are, code.visualstudio.com, and I'll see at the top I'm prompted to download for Windows. Totally makes sense because I'm on a Windows machine. But you may have seen before down here, if you go onto this site and downloaded VS Code, like, there's these other options I could use or other platforms. If I click on other platforms, I'll see, okay, cool. I can use VS Code on pretty much any kind of operating system and all these different installers. And I can even do things like use insiders to get new features sooner. So maybe folks, you could put in the chat if you've used VS Code insiders, or if you use insiders versus stable. Insiders is going to give you really active updates, potentially nightly, and it's going to have the green icon. So in today's demos, I'm going to be using VS Code insiders to make sure we have all the latest features and fixes. And then we even see that we're going to have an option to do some quick edits online, which we're going to get into a little bit more later. But just from starting off here in first session of VS Code, anything from anywhere, it seems like, okay, cool. This kind of does seem like from anywhere. This seems like a lot of different options. Let me go.
And when you say online, you're referring to vscode.dev that anyone could navigate to, right?
Yep. And we're going to go all into that as well. So if folks haven't tried vscode.dev or you've heard of it but you haven't tried it, we're going to do that for one of our demos today as well.
Cool.
So just to get into a little bit of how VS Code works and like what enables us to kind of run in this way, so that VS Code desktop app that we've been downloading from that website is a multi-process app. So that UI you're normally interacting with in VS Code runs in something called the Electron renderer process. And then extensions are going to run in their own extension host process. Each of those extensions can then spawn additional worker processes to do their work. Okay. And another quick fun tip and trick, so kind of our first tip of the day, you may not have known that there's actually a built-in process explorer in VS Code. So I'll go ahead and pop over to VS Code. Again, I'm in VS Code Insiders. You can see in the title or the green VS Code icon there. And if I open up the command palette, so Control-Shift-P or F1, I could say Open Process Explorer. And it's really cool. We can actually see all the different processes that it spawned, CPU, memory, and if anything was misbehaving, we could go ahead and stop them as well. Let me pop back open there. So with this multi-process architecture, there's several key benefits that it unlocks. So notably isolation and stability. One bad extension isn't going to tear down your entire editing experience or cause you to lose all your work. And it lets the OS manage resources for you, which it's generally going to be really good at. Another really key benefit that this model unlocks is portability. So we're going to be able to run processes pretty much anywhere, even on completely different machines. VS Code isn't going to care about where the processes are running. It just cares about the communication between them. So we could have our extensions running on the desktop, or we could have them running on a different remote machine or in the web. And since the UI is running in Electron, we can also serve that in the web as well. So since our architecture, as we just saw, supports running pretty much anywhere, and we found our users becoming increasingly remote, we released the VS Code Remote Development Extensions, which are going to let you use the Windows subsystem for Linux, or WSL, a container, or a remote machine as a full-featured development environment. You're going to be able to access that completely different machine right from your local desktop VS Code. And you're going to get access to any source code or any dependencies that are installed on them. Extensions and commands are going to run in that remote environment, which is going to make things feel seamless and pretty much just like you're working locally. All right, so that was kind of some quick context. And now the rest of the session is all going to be demos. So don't worry, don't think, oh, it's going to be all slides. No, that was just some context. Now we're on the same page, so then we can see how these remote things work in action.
So quick question.
Yeah.
I know there might be some people that might be wondering, is there a benefit? What's the benefit like doing this route versus just logging onto like a virtual machine to do it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And actually with this first scenario, my scenario is going to be that my code is on a virtual machine. And we're going to see that you're still going to get to use the VS Code that you're familiar with and you love and you're comfortable in. You got your extensions, you have your language completions. You're going to be able to use all of that while connected to your VM. And so you're still going to have the benefits of, oh, I can access all the code there, or anything that's installed there. but I also have the power and the comfort of my VS Code editor while I'm doing that.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
By the way, folks, if you have like questions, feel free to jump in anytime. And let's try to keep the questions related to our topic. Anyway.
All right. Sounds good. Cool. So as we can see, I've called this one scenario 1. And so throughout today's session, we're going to go through 5 different scenarios. I thought that it'd be cool to frame today's session in terms of these kinds of different scenarios. So that way it really feels like, hey, that's a scenario I've encountered. I kind of want to use that extension or use that tool. Or maybe you know someone who's encountered it. You can think about a real world scenario where it would apply to you or your colleagues or your friends.
Okay.
So for this first scenario, and I'm going to kind of start each scenario with a question for everyone in the audience to think about, or you could put it in the chat, your answer, what you're thinking about, if you feel comfortable with that. So I want you to think about, have you ever had to develop code that's located somewhere else, not on your local machine? There's quite a few things that could mean. It could mean that, hey, I'm working on a project for work. It's super confidential and important, and I need to connect to a super secure virtual machine for that. I can't have it on my local machine. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you want to work on some sort of really specialized or different kind of hardware or operating system, maybe like a Raspberry Pi, and somewhere that you can't even actually install VS Code, but it'd still be cool to use VS Code in some way. For this scenario, it's usually a pretty common one. And so we're going to use remote SSH to warm up today as our first scenario. And as I mentioned, my code is in a VM, specifically in an Azure VM. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and pop over to the browser.
And T. Kamansky, by the way, says, this is gnarly. I appreciate that expression.
I hope that's a good gnarly. Yeah, that can go a couple ways. I'm going to take it as a good gnarly. I agree.
I always thought gnarly was the positive. Now I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, I feel like it could be like, yo, that's gnarly, but it could also be like, I don't know. I have a feeling it could go either way, but I'm going to take it as a positive. So thank you.
All right. Well, Greg Tank says this is awesome, and I don't think there's any negative way to say awesome.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Sweet. So going over to the browser here, for some context for this scenario, we're going to use this repo on GitHub, or this code here that you can see on GitHub. And this is a public repo. You can check it out. And actually, for all 5 of our scenarios, we're going to use the same code base for them. I wanted to use the same code base for all of them, so it doesn't feel like, wow, we're doing 5 different environments and also 5 different apps. And now there's all these different variants, and that gets confusing. So it's going to basically be the same code, 5 different ways to work on it. So whatever works best for you.
Okay.
So some quick context about what this code looks like. So again, you can access it today, and we can see that it talks about containers, and it's basically going to be a GitHub Pages site that we actually use on our team to talk about dev containers. And if you want to see what this code actually looks like when it's run, we host it at containers.dev. Again, that's an active domain you can actually check out. So you can see it's just a website that kind of talks about like, hey, what are containers, some information about them, all that stuff. So we're going to see how to work with this code and how to run it in a few different ways today. So back over to VS Code. So to kick things off, I'm in VS Code Insiders, as I mentioned, and you may or may not have noticed that in the lower left on the gear icon, it has this RE. And so that might be a little bit different from something you've used or seen in your VS Code. And so if you haven't heard of them, I'm using a profile. And a VS Code profile is basically going to let me configure my VS Code with certain extensions or settings, depending on what I need for my specific projects or setup at the moment. So for instance, I knew for today's session that we're going to do a bunch of different remote development. So I'm in this remote profile where I know I have, for instance, the remote extensions installed. But maybe I also do a lot of Python development. So I have a specific profile set up for that. You can really create profiles for any kind of scenario or language or task. And you can also like upload them and share them with others too, so people can also have your environment.
So the profiles allow you to customize the extensions and what, I guess, color scheme and other stuff, or is it mainly just a
Yeah. So pretty much anything that there's going to be like a setting for you're installing, you should be able to put within your profile.
Okay. Richard asks, can local machine assets be transferred to the remote machine via the SSH connection through the VS Code interface?
Yeah, anything that we're going to see that we can edit the files directly and access the file system on the remote. So that means that we can edit things, we can delete them, we can add them, modify them, things like that.
Okay. And by the way, Rock Out Guy says gnarly equals rock out guys. A plus. Oh, I guess gnarly equals plus a positive. I think that's what he's saying.
Sweet. Okay, good to know. Thank you for clarifying. I couldn't live with not knowing if it was positive or negative, so this is good. Okay, sweet. So I will escape out of that, but just to double check, I can go ahead and open the extensions view on the left, and let's just type in remote and make sure that things are installed. Cool. I can see I have a variety of my remote extensions there, so we should be good to go to start using them since they are in my special remote profile. Now, whenever you have remote extensions installed and you want to use them, a really neat entry point is this lower left green remote indicator, we call it. So I can click on that, and I can see that it's a bunch of different commands across these different remote extensions. Now, something worth noting is that this remote indicator is a great entry point into a subset of the commands for each remote extension. So for instance, ones that help you get started, or maybe some of the more popular ones, like, oh, I want to connect to an SSH host. But these aren't the only commands that each remote extension provides. So if I escape out of that and I open up the command palette, so like Control-Shift-P or F1 again, and I type in remote SSH, I can see there's actually a bunch more commands besides just the two that we saw.
Wow, okay.
So I will go over back to the remote indicator, and I think I'm ready to go. Let's go ahead and connect to my host. So I can see here a list of any of the remote machines that I've added to my SSH configuration before. If I wanted to add a new one, I could just go through the quick picks here, super easy. But I know that for today's demo, my code is in this Brigit July VM, named it since it is July, So let's go ahead and connect to it. So we can see here that VS Code pretty much looks the same, but now we're actually connected to a completely remote environment. So in the lower left in our remote indicator, we can see it says we're using SSH. Cool, makes sense. And it says the name of that VM that I'm using. So Brigit July VM, sounds good.
Nice.
And now the terminal, go ahead.
I never noticed that the two arrows there before. So it's good you pointed that out.
Yeah, it can be a little subtle. Not everyone notices this one. So I always love to point it out because I think it's useful for keeping track of where you're working and then also for getting that entry point into some of the remote commands. Cool. So now this terminal, at this point, we're going to be working with our remote or working on our remote. So if I say uname, it says Linux. And it's like, wow, I'm on a Windows machine and I didn't really do anything to go spin up or connect somewhere else. But the SSH extension took care of that for us. So we added that host, then we just have to connect to it, and then we're in. And so now since I'm on a Linux-based VM, uname says Linux. So it's really cool. I'm already there. And then now when I go over to the file system and I want to open a folder, I can do that here. And again, it says I'm connected to my remote. And now all of these files and folders here are going to be ones that are on my VM. So these aren't on my local machine. These are on my VM.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and click on this repo because I know that was the one we were checking out. And this is going to be the repo that we wanted to work on. You're going to see VS Code just quickly reloads there. And now we can already see all of the files. Close that notification for now. Let me zoom in once more. It might look a little small. And so, yeah, we're able to now go ahead and click through our files. We're able to work on this app and this project just like we would if we were in desktop VS Code. So you can already see we're getting syntax highlighting. We'll get completions, IntelliSense. If I want, I can search through my repo. So this is about containers, super fast search time. Mm-hmm. And I can go ahead and install and use different extensions as well. Now, if you use the extensions a lot in VS Code, but you haven't done remote development before, you might not be familiar with, hey, there's like 2 different sections here. What does this mean? And so like we talked about with the architecture of VS Code, there's things that are going to be on your local desktop, and there's things that are going to be installed and running on the remote. So for instance, like if I want to use GitHub Copilot, because of course I want to get AI assistance, I can go ahead and install that on the remote. So it can access my remote files and run over on the remote machine. So speaking of Copilot, let's just go ahead and check out Copilot real quick. And so another quick tip in VS Code is we actually have the secondary sidebar. So this is a really cool way that you can drag anything pretty much into the secondary sidebar. And then you have this nice view where, hey, I still have my file explorer. I still have other things from the activity bar. I can have my code in the middle. And then I can also, for instance, talk to Copilot or do whatever I'd like if I drag it over here. And so you can drag views wherever you'd like in VS Code pretty much as well. So if I'm like, I want chat over there, I could totally do that. But I typically like having it in the secondary sidebar because then it feels nice that, oh, I can see my project, I can see the file tree, and I can still ask questions to Copilot.
Yeah. By the way, Jonathan Batiste says, what do you connect to on the VM machine?
Yeah, so basically I just have a VM running in Azure that I started right before this. And all you need to do is you're going to have like your basically the same way that you would connect to a VM from just like a terminal or from a command line. So you have like the IP address, for instance, and the username, and then either you're going to have like key based or or you can do password based. So whatever you prefer, you can configure that in remote SSH as well.
Okay.
All right, cool. That was a good question. All right, so, I always like to greet Copilot first. So let's just say good morning. So we say good morning to everyone here. I also want to make sure Copilot feels included. And it's okay, maybe it needs to think a little bit. There we go. And so we're going to see if you haven't used Copilot chat before, like, oh, we're going to get different like questions we can ask, and we can either type in questions or choose some pre-populated ones. And so as I'm working on this project, it's like, oh, maybe I don't really know much about some of the specifics if I'm new to it. So for instance, what language is my project written in? So that way, yeah, I can read through the README, I can look through the files, but maybe Copilot can just really quickly scan it. And we see that's the case. It says, oh, it's using Jekyll to build a website, and that's written in Ruby. So Ruby and Jekyll seem to be the basis here. So now that I've kind of connected to SSH, seen what that looks like, I've seen what my files look like, I know that this is a Ruby-based project essentially, and I'd like to go ahead and try running this app. So go ahead and close out of Copilot for now, just to give ourselves a little more space. Let's open up the terminal. All right, and now this terminal again is connected to our remote VM. So anything I type here is going to be attached to that VM. So I'd like to make sure, since I want to run this app, that I have Ruby installed. That sounds like it's dependent on it. Let's see. Okay, looks like I don't have Ruby installed here. Now there's a few different things I could do. I could totally just install Ruby on this VM, and I could do that directly from the command line here in VS Code. And maybe if I didn't know how to install Ruby or I needed some tips, I could go ahead and ask Copilot, hey, how do I install Ruby? And I'm sure it would walk me through the steps. But I think that it would be cool if my project already had all the dependencies it needed. Because what if it needs some other sort of languages or things on top of just Ruby after I install that? We actually have a way that you can automatically bring all the dependencies your project needs with it. And that's going to bring us into our next scenario. So I'm going to pop back over to PowerPoint. We're going to go into scenario 2. So I guess I'll pause there. Were there any other questions or feedback or thoughts on that first scenario before we transition?
You did get a new fan, an SSH fan. Ayomid says, I'm definitely going to learn how to use SSH after this.
Sweet.
You've converted. We're converting them.
Yeah, everyone counts. That's awesome. Thanks for letting us know. And as you try it out, be sure to let us know on Twitter, on GitHub, anywhere, how it goes through. If you have questions, feedback, anything like that. That's great to hear. All right. Okay. So going into scenario 2. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pose another question to the chat. And again, you can think about it or you can type your answer in the chat if you feel comfortable doing that. Who here has recently had to set up a new language or toolchain on their machine? Now, when you're thinking about that, what are some of the first things you do when you're trying to set up something new or get started with a new project? I know for me, I basically want to get up and running as quickly as possible. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and ask Copilot, how do I install these things, and use the commands it recommends. Maybe I'm going to ask my friends and my colleagues who've worked on this app, hey, what should I do, and get their help. And I'm going to read through the README and the docs, any information I can find online. And after some number of minutes, hours, days, weeks, who knows how long, I'll have everything installed and I'll be able to run this language or this tool chain or get this app working.
Okay, so Richard Yellowhawk says, not I, this is where I get lost. So Richard, I'd ask, like, where do you get lost? And maybe Brigit, can you explain what a tool chain is? Because I know some people might not know exactly what that is.
Yeah, you can think of it basically as anything that you're going to need to work on or run a specific kind of project or code. So maybe if you're trying to, for instance, the app that I was just working on, Copilot mentioned to us, oh, like this is based on Jekyll, which is based on Ruby. So kind of looking at all of those dependencies that I would need to run that app we were just working on. So I would need Ruby. I would need to check, does that come with Jekyll? Do I have to do other things? Maybe I need something else to develop it as well. I might need some other settings or configuration or path updating and that kind of stuff. So just kind of all of the installations and configuration that come with setting up a new language or a new tech stack for an app or for a scenario. Does that make sense?
So all those is what comprises what a tool chain is. It's a series of dependencies and tools that you need in order to get things working, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Cool.
And that's a great question. So thank you for asking that. And if anyone else has questions about like terminology I say or use, please just put it in the chat and I'm super happy to explain it. Cool. So now that we've kind of thought through that scenario and thought through, okay, what am I doing when I have to essentially install something new or install maybe a bunch of things new? So maybe I have everything installed, but at some point the dependencies could change. Maybe a new version of a language or a package comes out, or maybe folks make some changes to the app I'm working on and now I need a new dependency. I need new versions of new dependencies. It would be really convenient if I really didn't have to worry about installing anything and I could just have everything my app needs to run as like part of its source code in some way. And it'd be cool if I don't only have that, but also all of my teammates or all of the other contributors to this project to automatically get that too. So that might sound a little bit impossible or out there, but it's actually totally possible today. It's possible with dev containers. So that's going to be how we tackle this second scenario. And we're going to go ahead and pop back into VS Code to check it out. So we are back here in VS Code. Just as a recap, we're still connected to our remote VM via the remote SSH extension. And we found that we need to use Ruby for this app, but we don't have it installed on the VM.
Quick question, Brigit.
Yeah.
Tom Kamaski asks, can AI help to set up an SSH remote if you're having problems?
Yeah, I think that I've asked Copilot a couple of SSH or remote SSH questions, and it depends on the nature of your questions or where you're at in your setup. And so I'd recommend, I think the best way for finding out is just trying to ask some of the questions you have and being able to also kind of iterate on those questions. So seeing, and that's just general kind of like Copilot or AI advice of, hey, if I ask one question, it doesn't really know how to tackle this. Could I give it some other kind of context? Could I rephrase it? But it should be able to help you with that. It kind of just depends on what the questions are.
All right.
All right, cool. So you may or may not have noticed when we were in GitHub or when we were looking here in the File Explorer that this project has this folder called .devcontainer. Let me close the terminal to get some more real estate. And when I open up this folder, I can see that basically the key file within it is devcontainer.json. Now, devcontainer.json is going to be the file that tells VS Code how to spin up and connect to a containerized environment with all the dependencies you need for your project. So you can quickly take a look at what are the properties it has. So it has a name here, and this is just going to be a friendly name for our dev container. We could use anything. We're using Jekyll here, which makes sense because I think this is going to be a Jekyll-based configuration. Now we have this property image, and an image is basically going to tell the container what should go into it. And so we can see here that this is a Jekyll-based image. So that sounds good because we want to have a Jekyll-based environment. And if you've done any kind of Docker development before, you may have heard of or used Docker files or Docker Compose files. You could totally reference those here instead. It just depends on what kind of setup you want to use. Then we can see we have some other things, like it seems like we're installing Node, and we could even do things like setting up how to forward our ports or run some other scripts and commands automatically. So this is cool. It seems like I have a general idea of what's inside it and maybe what my environment would look like out of this. Mm-hmm. And it seems like in the future, yeah, I could probably go ahead and create some of these kinds of files, these dev container JSONs by hand. But the dev containers extension wants to make it as easy as possible for you to create and use containers. So if I click on the remote indicator again in the lower left, we'll see in the dev container section of commands, we have this add dev container configuration files. If I click on that, first it's going to warn me, hey, you already have a dev container JSON. Totally all right. I just want to see what the commands look like. So I'll say continue. So we can see here that it looks like we have a variety of different kinds of like languages or scenarios that we could configure. I'm going to say show all so I can see the full list. And if I type in, for instance, Jekyll, cool. I can see that there's going to be a configuration I can use for Jekyll. And I didn't need to like go find it or know it exists or figure out the syntax for it. And then it's going to guide me through some other configuration just automatically. And so, for instance, maybe the Debian OS version. We don't really need to worry too much about that now. So I'll just say the default. And then we see we have this quick pick for selecting features. And so when you're setting up an environment, you may have been in a scenario where, hey, I spent all this time installing these different languages I need, and I configured the path, and I set these settings. Cool, I think I have everything. But then you realize, like, I just need like one more thing. I just need one more CLI, or actually do need this other language. And so features aim to help you with that. So for instance, if it's like, I just need something with Node, we have all these different options here. And even though I say it's like just one more thing, since it's a checkbox, you could actually add a bunch of different features really conveniently.
Okay.
I'm going to escape out of that for now. But now that we've gotten kind of an overview of dev container JSON, I say we go ahead and connect to our dev container. I'll pause though. Were there any questions or thoughts so far?
Not related to what you just said.
All right. Sounds good. Then we will keep going forward. So to connect to this dev container now, whatever system I'm running on, I just need to make sure that I have Docker installed there. So I could totally use dev containers on my local desktop as long as I have Docker installed and running. Or since I'm connected to a remote VM, it'd be cool if I could just use a dev container within this remote VM. And I actually can, because the dev containers extension and the remote SSH extension work really well together. So back to the remote indicator, our favorite spot, and we're going to say reopen in container. And now we're going to reload, and still looks like basically the same VS Code. And we are still connected to this VMs. This is still code that I haven't had to clone or copy on my local machine. And now we're within a dev container though. And so to kind of take a look at, hey, what am I connected to? Where am I working? In the lower left remote indicator, we can see now it looks a little bit different. So it says dev container, which makes sense because I just connected to my dev container. And it says Jekyll. And that was that name that we had in dev container JSON. So cool, we see it reflected here. And then it also tells us, hey, you're also in this SSH machine. So at first it may look like, wow, that seems kind of long, or like a lot of different terms, what's going on there? But when you break it down like that, it's like, okay, cool, I'm using a dev container and it's on my SSH box still. So things are working and connected, I think, as I would expect.
Now, quick comment. Daniel Silva says, I'm head over heels in love with dev containers. Could you share any plans to optimize VS Code's resource usage in dev containers?
I'm super glad that you love dev containers. I love them too, if you couldn't tell. I think that it'd be great to know what kind of issues you're experiencing. So we do have a public issues repo for everything about the remote extensions, github.com/Microsoft/VS Code remote release. So if you have a specific issue you're encountering or a bug or something that feels like it's not quite right, it'd be awesome to open a feature request there. Or if there's already one open, just like make sure to share that with us. You can feel free to tag me and we can take a closer look at that.
Cool.
Cool. So I think we've spent enough time just looking through these files and connected to environments. Let's go ahead and actually run this app. So since I've mentioned you can use all sorts of regular local things within this remote environment, something we can also use is any tasks we have configured. So let's go ahead and run a task that I know I have configured to go ahead and serve up this app. So I have this serve task. Let's select it. See the terminal pops open, our app runs, and it says, hey, your app's running on port 4000. And again, the remote environment took care of that for me, so I didn't have to worry about manually going and doing that. All right, let's go ahead and open it in the browser. And there it is. This looks like the site that we saw at the beginning of the session at containers.dev, and I'm able to really click through it and work with it. And this is awesome. This is an app running with code that I don't have on my local machine in a language that I don't really use and I don't even have installed on my local machine or on my remote machine. And I was able to run it and I can continue developing it.
Wow, that's super cool. Now, questions are pounding in now. But they all queued it up to the last minute. Like they all organized. Let's all do it now, folks. Okay. Yonatan says the dev container.json schema changed a few times over the past few months. Where should we look for the current version?
It's actually a perfect question. It's like you set me up for we're on containers.dev. And so this is the homepage for everything dev containers. And this is where you're going to get the latest. And for a little bit of context about dev containers, since they are supported in VS Code, and we're actually going to see next, they're supported in something called GitHub Codespaces. But we found that they really are powerful for any kind of environment or any kind of editor. So we open sourced the dev container specification last year. And so this site not only talks about dev containers as you might use them in VS Code, it talks about them just overall in the open spec. And so any latest information you want is going to be within here. And so, for instance, we have this metadata reference with all of the latest, and we keep this super updated. And then we also on GitHub, we can see that this website is in the dev containers org on GitHub. And if you go to that org as well, you're going to see different repos related to the spec and everything that's the latest in dev containers going on.
All right. Next question by Alexis Fraga. Do you have Docker installed on the virtual machine on Azure?
Yes, I do. And that's a great question. So thanks for clarifying that. I have Docker installed on the VM. So that's how this is able to work.
All right. Ed Schneider asks, is a dev container the same as a virtual environment?
That's a really good question. It's kind of close, but there are differences between containers and VMs. And so a VM is like in Azure, I connected to a whole different Linux box. But so I'm connected to that separate Linux box, this Brigit July VM. And then on top of that Brigit July VM, I'm able to use containers or configure the environment with a dev container. So VM is more of like the full featured machine. And then we can specifically configure things with our project within it with a dev container.
Cool. That's it for now.
Okay, cool. These are great questions. Keep them coming. All right. So I will go ahead and stop the app running for now. Great, sweet. So we saw running that app and working with this project in my VS Code here has been pretty fast and pretty seamless. But there may be times where I'm working on a project that is really compute intensive. Maybe it's machine learning or AI or data science related. And so it needs a lot of GPUs. Or maybe it's just like a larger project overall with more dependencies. And I would just like a more powerful machine than what I have in my local computer. With this scenario, that's going to bring us over to scenario 3. So another question for the group for you to think about or for you to put in the chat. Who here has maybe sometime recently or at any point thought, oh my gosh, my computer might catch on fire because I'm running something that is so intensive, some app or something that I'm working on, and the fans are just going, there's so much heat being generated. This is a mistake. I want to stop this. What's going on?
I wonder if that's ever actually happened. Like a computer actually like caught on fire. Or just,
I hope not. I hope no one's computer here has actually ever caught on fire. I was going to clarify that. I really hope that has not like truly happened to anyone here.
You'll be like, what app were you running?
Yeah. Put in the chat what app you were running. But so when you're thinking about that kind of scenario that maybe you've encountered or you could imagine encountering, there's a few ways again that we could tackle it. With really all these scenarios, there's a few different ways we could tackle them. One of them is I could go ahead and remote SSH into a more powerful machine. That would totally work. But there may be times where I don't really want to configure SSH, or maybe I don't have another VM or another desktop machine readily available for me, and I don't really want to manage that or create one. So for this third scenario, we're going to use GitHub Codespaces, which are going to provide us cloud-powered development environments suitable for just about anything. Okay, so we are going to go back over to VS Code. And you may have noticed in the activity bar, we have this icon that's a remote explorer. And so similar to how the remote indicator in the lower left gave us an entry point into different commands for the remote extensions, this remote explorer is going to give us an entry point into different remote machines or different remote environments that we can connect to.
Okay.
So I can see here I have a drop down for all the different remotes that I have installed and I've been using. And we're going to go ahead and open up GitHub Codespaces. And here we can see that I actually have a couple of code spaces for this project that we've been working on. And I could go ahead and create a new code space, either on the repo I'm currently working on or on any GitHub repo that I have access to. And when I hover over, I can see the information about the code spaces that I have here. So for instance, I could see what size machine it is. I can see when it was created or last used. And I could even see what branch it's created on. So we can create code spaces on different branches, which is really nice because code spaces also support dev containers. So maybe you could have different dev containers on different branches, or maybe you have different code changes or different working changes on different branches, and you'd like to configure different environments based on each of those. I'm going to go ahead and connect to my code space here. And something else that's worth noting is you can totally use code spaces in the browser as well. So there's a VS Code desktop extension, which is what I'm using here, but you have a few different options again for using code spaces too.
Nice.
Okay, sweet. So it's again going to look quite similar to all the environments we were just in, which is what's really nice. It doesn't feel like I have to learn all these new UI tricks and VS Code feels so different. It can really feel quite consistent. And as we've been switching environments a few times, a couple of things to highlight again. Again, we have what remote name we are here. So we're connected to a code space. Makes sense that it says editing on code spaces here in the remote indicator. You may have noticed when I hovered over the code space in the remote explorer, it said BA Murtaugh July. This is the branch that I'm working on. So VS Code in general has really great GitHub and just Git and source control overall integration. So for instance, I could go ahead and switch branches. And this isn't something that's just remote specific. You can switch branches and create new branches even when you're working on just regular local projects. Okay.
Quick question, by the way.
Oops, sorry. I clicked the wrong thing. Let me get back there. Cool.
Question by Praveen. They ask, let's say I want to code a bash script that needs Ubuntu Linux. Does CodeSpace also provide a virtual container? That almost sounds like an interview question.
Yeah, CodeSpaces is based on a VM. And so it's going to be basically like compute that's managed for you by GitHub. So rather than me needing to create and start and manage that VM I was just using in remote SSH, in CodeSpaces, I can instead say, hey, I want this much compute. I want this kind of dev container backing it, and it'll just spin that up and manage it for me. So it's a nice way to have things kind of managed for you there rather than, oh, like sometimes you want to have that control over another machine, but sometimes you don't. So we have both options.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is too much gearing off course, but by S4 Writer, when using code spaces, how do I manage private API keys in order to access third-party services, for example, an open API?
That's a great question. There's different secrets management and token management and those kinds of things. So if you go into your GitHub settings and look for the code spaces option, I think you may be able to find what you're looking for there. If not, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to find a way to get you that answer.
It'll be funny if you said, if not, just ask Copilot.
Honestly, that's my answer for a lot of things now too. If I'm not sure, like, oh, what's the term for that, or what's the exact thing there, I like to ask Copilot. Sometimes it can really help you look things up, and that's really nice.
Yeah. All right.
Cool. So now I think we've run this app, we've looked through it, we've connected to it in different ways. What if I want to try making an edit? What does that look like? And then what if I want to go through the pull request or the PR process with it? As an example, I just opened up dev container JSON, and we could try making some edits to this file. So for instance, we mentioned that this is a Ruby-based project, essentially, with Ruby and Jekyll. So what if I decided, oh, I think it would be really helpful to have the Ruby feature installed in VS Code or in my dev container? You can see that I was kind of just thinking that and describing it aloud, and then all of a sudden I got this gray ghost text. Now, this is also coming from GitHub Copilot. So Copilot isn't only going to be the chat that we're having in the sidebar we saw, for instance. It's also going to help us as we're actually writing code and give us inline suggestions and completions and maybe different options even too that we could tab through if there were more suggestions. So this looks about right to me. So I'm going to tab it and accept it.
And with all these scenarios that you're showing us, Copilot could be used in all of them?
Yes. Yeah, I think the fourth scenario that will be coming up, I don't think you could quite use it there, and I'll explain more when we get to the fourth scenario. But for all the scenarios we've seen so far, you could use Copilot with all of them.
Okay.
All right, cool. So now that we have this here, we can see that the SCM, or the source control view, says that there's a change. Makes sense, as I did just make a change to this file. And so let's go ahead and try committing it. So let's say add Ruby feature. And we could go ahead and stage that change and commit it. And again, this is really great with VS Code's built-in source control. And this is something that's not just specific to remote environments. So you can do this just with regular local projects as well. Cool. Let's push this change to our branch. And I think now I'd like to start getting some of my teammates to review this change that I worked on. So in the left here, I have this GitHub icon, and this is coming from an extension known as GitHub Issues and Pull Requests. So what we can do here is, we see, kind of like the name would suggest, we can look through different PRs that's related to this repo, and we can look through issues that I've created or other folks have created and assigned to me. So again, it's a really nice view of my GitHub work, and I didn't even have to leave VS Code if I didn't want to. Now, in order to actually create a pull request, I don't have to leave VS Code either. I have this button to create a pull request right from this extension view. We can see here that the steps are going to be pretty much what I would expect from github.com or from other Git or GitHub clients. I can choose the remote, looks good, and then I can choose what branch I'm merging from and merging into. I think this all looks great because this is the branch that I've been working on. And then this is essentially in a GitHub Pages app what the main branch is. So that looks good to me. Cool. And now we could go ahead and add a quick title and description. So let's say add Ruby feature, then a description, more Ruby. And that'll, maybe make our teammates chuckle. We could choose auto merge behavior if you want, but since I'm still kind of early on these changes, maybe I'll iterate on it. I just want to create this PR as a draft for now. Let's go ahead and create it. Cool. And now we're actually going to have this PR view pop right into our VS Code. And we can see that we see the title, we see the link to it on GitHub. We could add reviewers, we could add labels, we could add comments, assignees, all the kind of stuff that we might want to do when working with PRs and working with GitHub. We don't have to leave our editor for. So whatever you're comfortable with and makes you more productive, VS Code is there to support you with that. All right. So we've now created this PR, and I'd like to actually have one of my friends or one of my teammates.
There was a quick comment that was there.
Yeah.
Fallout 76 says, -Mazen G. I'm kidding, folks. I know it's amazing. All right. I'm not sure what it means by Mazen. I'm sure there was somebody that probably misread it. Someone explained it. They're like, that's amazing.
I'm glad. These are the reactions we love to hear. So thank you for hearing that, for sharing your excitement. We're excited too.
All right.
Okay, sweet. So we are now heading into scenario 4. So another question for folks to think about, put in the chat if you feel comfortable. Who here has recently reviewed code from a teammate or from a friend? When you're reviewing code from someone, how do you approach it? For me, I'm probably thinking about, okay, should I review this in the browser? Maybe it would feel more comfortable and more convenient to review this in VS Code. But then do I need to clone the repo? Do I already have some working changes or a different branch that I'm doing in desktop or a whole different project? And I have to clone that or stash my changes and all these kinds of things. And I hope this doesn't disrupt my local environment too much. It would feel more convenient if I could just pop into a quick VS Code environment dedicated to this PR, doesn't disrupt my current local work, and then I could just go back to my other work after I review this PR. And so again, few options to approach this. I could spin up a code space that's dedicated just to this PR essentially, and I could review it and I could get that awesome functionality we saw that's integrated with pull requests and issues in VS Code. But maybe if it's a really lightweight or fast PR and a quick change, I may not really need to spin up much, if any, compute. And so for this, for lightweight changes, quick reviews, quick edits, we can use VS Code for the web or vscode.dev. So this is what Reynolds and I were talking about at the beginning when we saw the VS Code website, and then we saw there was this option for vscode.dev. And I was like, oh, cool, what is that? And now we're going to take a look at what that is.
So before we jump right in, a few more questions just came in.
Yeah.
LowViz asks, does VS Code have a remote scenario where I can debug with local source Windows code running on remote Azure VM, for example, kind of like reverse remote tunnel?
Reverse remote tunnel. So I think I'd probably want to understand a little bit more about that scenario. So I don't know, maybe if afterwards, if you want to put more info in the chat, or maybe you can follow up with me afterwards of what you're envisioning there. Because yeah, I was thinking of maybe something like remote SSH or remote tunnels. So I think I'd want to know more about what you're expecting or interested in there.
Yeah, so there's a follow-up and maybe add a little bit more context to it. The other question that came up was from Alexis Fraga. Is it possible to share your VS Code profile that you're using today? Is that possible?
I could, yeah. It's really all that's within it is just the remote extensions. So if you go into VS Code and install, we have a remote development extension pack. That's going to include all of them. If there's anything specific about my environment that you're curious about or anything you're seeing, please let me know. But otherwise, just installing some or all of the remote extensions should get you what we saw today.
Is that like a feature where you could share a profile and someone just gets the exact same profile?
I go over to the gear and I click on profiles. I could import or export them. So I could export it to a gist, I believe, and then share that with folks or use that on other machines.
Okay, that's cool to know. Yeah,
definitely. So yeah, I'm happy to share this one, but I think that it's probably not the most interesting. And if you get the remote extensions, you should have everything that you're seeing here. So just let me know.
Okay. And then Robert M asks, for GitHub Codespaces, how do I configure the development environment in GitHub Codespaces? Like I need node 18 rather than 20.
That's a great question. That is a perfect fit for your dev container JSON. And so within there, we could see, for instance, that I was using Jekyll, but you could replace this with a node-based image, or you could add node in a specific version of node within features. Or you could also specifically use a Docker file or a Docker Compose file if you're more comfortable with that. But really going through like the add dev container configuration files, which is also a command that's available in Codespaces, just like it was in the dev containers extension, it's going to let you really pick and configure a lot of those things that it sounds like you need.
All right.
Okay, great. These are great questions. Thanks all for sharing them. So let's go ahead and pop over to the browser again. And let's go ahead and I'm on my repo. And I want to go ahead and check out that pull request we just opened up. Cool. So I can already see it on GitHub. So we can see that no, VS Code didn't just like make it up and make a fake pull request. It is truly here. And now I could go ahead and look at the files changed in github.com. But like I mentioned, I want to use VS Code for the web. So a really cool trick we can do is on any GitHub repo or on any GitHub PR, we can just add vscode.dev to the beginning of the URL there. And now what that's going to do is it's going to pop us in this lightweight version of VS Code running entirely in our browser. And so since we specifically put this on a pull request, we're going to see that it pops open this diff view for our PR. And just like we were doing in VS Code Desktop with GitHub Codespaces, we could add comments or you could add other information to our PR depending on what we need. So for instance, start a discussion there. And now, so we're looking at this VS Code and it's like, wow, it's in my browser. How is this similar or different from my desktop VS Code? And so it's going to be pretty similar, but there are a few key differences. So we're going to see, again, all of my files here from my repo or from my PR that I was working on. Depending on the type of file or the language, I'll get different levels of syntax highlighting and completions. But it is worth noting that this is a lightweight version of VS Code, so there isn't any backend compute. So for instance, certain extensions are going to work just right out of the box, or if their extension author web enabled them, but not every extension is going to work automatically, or there may be some extra work required. So for instance, yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to ask, so this is the scenario you said we couldn't use Copilot in right now?
Correct. Yeah, because I believe that Copilot isn't yet web enabled. So this is just that one scenario. So yeah, just for context there. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay.
Cool. So then as an example of like usually like themes, languages, snippets, those kinds of things are extensions that'll just usually work right out of the gate in the browser. And so for instance, one theme that I love using, and if you've ever seen me do a demo before, I always go for fairy floss. And so we can see we could install that extension, no problem. And now we have this nice purple editor that I think will just make everything more exciting as we close out our session. Then exiting out of there, we can see that we already also have another extension installed called GitHub Issue Notebooks. So we've already seen the really cool Git and GitHub integration right in VS Code in these different ways with like the branch picker and the pull request view and creating pull requests and all of that stuff. But there's actually also a way that we can take a broader look at our issues or our projects overall on GitHub. And it's through this Issues Notebook extension. So I know in my project, I already have a notebook created. And so this is something cool. If you didn't know that VS Code has notebook support, it does. And also that notebook support can work in the browser. So here we are that we've created a notebook, and it's specifically that GitHub Issues notebook because I wanted to query different GitHub projects I have. So for instance, I have in this code cell here, hey, I want to look at the spec repo. And this is one of the repos I was describing earlier that's part of the dev containers org. And maybe I want to look at all issues on the backlog milestone. I can run that, and then cool, I get real output, and I'm going to get real links to issues. I can click on them, I can explore them, and this is a great way to get, again, a different kind of look into querying data right from our VS Code environment.
Nice. And we're referring to Jupyter Notebooks, right?
Yep.
Jonathan B. has a comment, scenario 3. Can we have the compiler on the remote machine executing local code? For example, local TOX running multiple versions of remote python.exe on my local code.
There might be a way to configure that kind of environment, but I'd recommend trying it out and seeing maybe if it seems like that would work. I think that really like your best bet would be moving over the code to the remote or working with code that's on the remote if you want to use like the remote tools or the remote extensions with it.
Okay. And now this question almost seems like a trick question from Fallout 76. Is there a way to check code from GitHub before I start interacting with them after deemed safe to use?
Yeah, so there's a feature called Workspace Trust. And so you might not have seen it pop during some of these demos because I've already trusted some of the directories that I'm working with. But typically when you're opening up a new project or a new directory in VS Code, it'll ask you if you trust it. So depending on what you're opening, if you've trusted it before, you should see some sort of dialogue about that at some point.
Yeah, he just threw up a follow-up comment, like, is there a way to ensure that the data on GitHub isn't bad code or suspicious code? So that still applies, your answer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, let's continue.
Okay, sweet. And so we have basically one final scenario, and I know we only have a couple minutes left, but this last one can be quick. So as I was mentioning, VSCode.dev is a lightweight version of VS Code. So if I open up the terminal, for instance, we're going to see that we don't actually have a terminal built into it here because there's no backend compute. But we have these really convenient ways that we can continue working in other environments. So for instance, we could spin up a code space in just a click, or we could clone this repo locally in just a click. And of course, if we're committing things back to GitHub, all of our changes are going to come with us. But even if you haven't committed them yet and they're in progress, if you turn on cloud changes, which you can just sign into your GitHub account, for instance, your changes are also going to come with you when you switch environments, even if they're still in progress and haven't been committed. So even as you're switching environments from web to desktop or code spaces or elsewhere, your project and your changes will come with you.
Nice.
Cool. And then we see here, so no terminal, but there actually is a way that you can bring compute and bring a terminal to this web environment. And that's going to be our final scenario. So scenario 5, I'll touch on it a little bit more quickly, but folks, please feel free to follow up with me after. I just don't want to go too far over time. So we may see a scenario where, hey, I want to develop somewhere completely different, and maybe I'm really not going to have like my regular computer with me, as we've kind of discussed. And maybe specifically for this kind of scenario, I want to go code at the beach, and I'm only bringing my tablet with me, or I'm only bringing my Chromebook with me. In this scenario, we've basically seen that, yeah, there are different ways we could tackle it. And the remote extensions we've seen, there are so many different options, but there could still be a few gaps up with the things we've seen. So for instance, with my tablet, I could use GitHub code spaces, but what if my code isn't on GitHub? And I can't use remote SSH because my tablet doesn't work with SSH. So this is going to bring us to the idea of tunnels. We can securely connect to another machine without having to configure SSH at all. And you may not think about it, but VS Code actually has a built-in code CLI that lets you spin up and connect to the desktop editor. Up until last year, it was just for desktop connections. But last year, we released a new version of the code CLI that lets you create and configure tunnel connections with it. And this new code CLI, I'm going to demo it in just a second. It'll come automatically with your VS Code desktop installation. So if you've installed VS Code, you're going to have the code CLI. But you can also install it as a standalone component. And you can do that on the VS Code website that we started at the beginning. There were some CLI installations there. So let's go ahead and just real quick, I'm going to pop back in and show a terminal. And so when I'm working with the code CLI, I can either use code or I can use code insiders, depending if I'm using insiders or not. And then I want to say tunnel. And let's just take a quick look at some of the options. Oh, so we can see we have these different commands and advanced options for starting or stopping tunnels. We even have some advanced configurations, like I could run it with no sleep, which is really helpful because we've probably all been in a scenario where our computer goes to sleep or updates or restarts and it disrupts our work. So this can try to help prevent our tunnel and our machine from shutting down or going to sleep. Cool. So let's just real quickly start a tunnel connection. This is really all we need to do here is just say code insiders or code tunnel. And then we're going to have a few options. We're going to see here that we get this VS Code dev link, and we can open that now on any machine as long as we can log in with the same GitHub account. So I could open this on this machine, even though it's a little less exciting since I would just be like remoting into my own machine on a tunnel. But I could go ahead and open this link on a different laptop, a different desktop computer, on my phone, on my tablet, pretty much anywhere as long as I can log in with the same account. And then just like we saw with like the remote VM or any of these remote environments, I'm going to get access to anything that's on this machine where I started the tunnel. So any of the code that I'm working on or anything installed. And I'll just quickly open this up so we can see an example. And as this loads up, we're going to see that again, looks like vscode.dev, but now it's going to be kind of like a more powerful version of it that we brought our own compute to. So we're going to see it's connecting to my desktop machine where I launched the tunnel, and it's going to get this convenient of the browser, but it's going to now have, for instance, like a terminal, or we're going to be able to install any extensions we would like on it.
Nice.
And you're seeing here that we're using vscode.dev, but you don't have to use vscode.dev if you want to use tunnels. You can also use them in VS Code desktop. So we have something called the remote tunnels extension. If I search that up real quick. And so you can use remote tunnels to also start or connect to tunnels from VS Code desktop. So no matter where you prefer working, all of them are going to work. And I'll just let that spin up in the background as we kind of conclude our session here. Journey with me in VS Code. We've listed some different docs and GitHub resources, and even a QR code in the upper left that's going to give you a more comprehensive set of resources you can check out. And yeah, if there's any other questions or comments in the chat, I'd love to hear them. And thank you so much. Happy coding.
That was awesome. All right. So we are going to do our quick last segment. It's called Lightning Round. Are you ready for that? It's just 5 quick questions. You answer just the first thing that comes on top of your head.
All right. I'm ready.
All right. Producer's on it. I didn't have to ask. First question, biggest pet peeve.
Biggest pet peeve. I don't like chewing sounds. Does that count?
Oh no. I get it. I get it. Many dates have been canceled based on that. No more second dates based on live showing signs. Number 2, the scariest thing you've ever done for fun.
For fun. I don't know. I love going to concerts. I find those a lot of fun, but sometimes if you end up like at the front or accidentally in the center where people are like pushing really hard or they start like throwing around or doing mosh pits, it's like, wow, I love concerts, but I was not ready for this, so please get me out of here.
Yeah, no slam dancing for me. I'll just watch the video. Is it GIF or is it GIF?
I say GIF.
Okay. I'm team GIF too.
Okay. I was like, you didn't seem happy by that. I was like, oh, are you team GIF?
No, I am. I did GIF. I think of peanut butter, and I can't not think of peanut butter.
I also think of peanut butter.
Yeah. All right. What's one VS Code extension you cannot live without?
I think definitely dev containers. I mean, any of the ones that I showed today, I use a ton, but dev containers now is one where I was recently trying to work on a project locally without using one. And I was like, oh my gosh, when is the last time I updated any of these tools? They're all old or like incorrect versions. Now I need to do like node version manager. I'm like, no, I just love dev containers. Just get me in there.
Nice. Last question. First guest if you had your own talk show. I love this question.
My first guest. Wow. I don't know. I don't have like a ready answer for that one. I don't know. I'll think about that one.
Oh, come on. First guest, someone important that someone impresses you. We're not going to skip that one.
I don't know, because there's too many people. Like, there's so many people at work. Like, I feel like everyone on my team.
Like,
can I just have like
me?
Can I have everyone on the team, like including you, as like a collective like group interview and discussion? Because like I feel like everyone would bring. I learned so much from like everyone on the team when I talked to them, and so like we all bring something new. So I'm gonna do something new and have like a 40-person interview with everyone that we work with.
Okay, fine. I'll take it. Thanks so much, Brigit. This is awesome. This has been awesome. If you have like new fans now and they want to reach out to you, what's the social media that you want to share?
Yeah, so if you're opening issues on GitHub or discussions there or anything, I'm at BA Murtaugh, so BA and then my last name. Or on Twitter, I'm at Brigit Murtaugh. So with any of those, please feel free to reach out.
All right, great. Some people started answering for you. They're like Joe Rogan, Tim Pool. You're like, oh.
I'm glad everyone else can give me ideas too. You know, if I ever get to that talk show, the second episode after I interview the whole VS Code team will be some of their suggestions.
All right. So producer, if you could throw up some of our social medias, folks. If you want to follow us, you know we're on YouTube as you're like watching this now, and there's our TikTok channel also. So we also have like some great content on there. So check us out on both TikTok.com at VS Code and on YouTube at Code. So join us again next week. Once again, thanks, Brigit. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was great.
All right. Bye.